Thank you. We'll now go ahead and move to item A3. I'll call the meeting to order, and then A4, I'll ask for a roll call of members who are present this evening.
Mr. Allen?
Here.
Mr. McClellan?
Here.
Mr. Melcher?
Here.
Mr. Roth?
Here.
Mr. Yarger is absent. Mr. Wall?
Here.
Mrs. Helm? Here.
All right, we'll move to item A5. Mr. Trout, are there any revisions to the agenda this evening?
We do not have any this evening. Mr. Roth?
Okay, we'll now move on to item B1, core values discussion.
This is always a great part of our board meeting, that we can recognize students and staff that have been outstanding, and exciting part of our time together. And I'm excited to be the one that gets to read this for Lauren Hogue. So Lauren, if you would come on down. Tonight we are proud to honor Lauren Hogue, a dedicated teacher at Andrews Elementary School. She's been there in their district for 5 years, who truly embodies our core values. Lauren has consistently demonstrated high expectations, high achievement, and accountability in her work. Her commitment to focus on the future and continuous improvement for all is evident in everything that she does. Recently, Lauren had the honor of presenting at the 2024 Model Schools Conference in Orlando, Florida, where she earned the prestigious title of Epic Educator. The Model Schools Conference is a renowned gathering for educational professionals, showcasing schools, districts, and educators who have achieved remarkable success. This event celebrates excellence and innovation in education, and Lauren's participation is a testament to her dedication to these ideals. In her presentation, Lauren shared her expertise on how to use data to differentiate instruction and form skill groups based on NWA assessments. She took the initiative to create charts to help staff organize and interpret the vast amount of information we receive from these tests. By turning complex data into an easily understandable format, Lauren has made it possible for her colleagues to make evidence-based decisions that directly benefit our students. Her leadership in this area is a shining example of shared leadership within our district. Lauren's work not only enhances the learning experience for her students, but also empowers her fellow educators to achieve their best. Lauren, on behalf of the Huntington County Community School Corporation, we thank you for your dedication, your innovation, and your unwavering commitment to excellence. You're an inspiration to us all, and we are honored to have you as a part of our team. Congratulations, Lauren. We're proud of you. And that is the only core value that we have this evening.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to item C1, items from visitors. This is an opportunity for public comment, usually on matters that we're addressing this evening. So if you would like to address the board, you can come forward to the microphone there, and we'll bring the sheet over and you can sign. No one signed up in advance, but if anyone would like to address the board, now is your opportunity to do so. All right, no one having come forward, we'll move on to item D1, Indiana Works and HCCSC JAG memorandum.
Yeah, Board, I present to you tonight our annual agreement with the JAG program at Huntington North High School. Each year it is also reviewed by Mr. Wiley. Very successful program in our high school, and this is our annual request for renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Brimberry. Would anyone like to make a motion regarding the proposed memorandum of understanding?
Make a motion that we approve the memorandum of understanding between JAG and HCCSC.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions, comments, or discussion? Just personally, I think this is a wonderful program that started, I believe Mr. Deggett's kind of started that here at Huntington North, and it's really been successful. Chief Blair in particular, great group of students, so it's a good thing that we're continuing this.
Excellent program, benefits our kids greatly, so I'm always pleased to bring this forward.
All right, hearing nothing further, we'll vote on the motion to approve. All right, motion passes 6-0. We'll now go to item D2, Alive and Well and HCCSC agreement.
Board, I'd also bring our annual middle school Alive and Well agreement for board action tonight. Has been reviewed by Mr. Wiley, has been reviewed by our corporation nurse, Meg Friesen, both middle school principals as well. This is truly an outstanding program. Information has been sent to our parents as well as all stakeholders on this. And Meg will be also having, with our middle school principals, a optional parent meeting on this topic if anyone were to choose to come. Again, it's a mental health and mental awareness program and curriculum that we've done for many years at Huntington, and a very valuable program, very important to our district. So I recommend your action tonight on that.
Okay, would anyone like to make a motion regarding this agreement?
Well, agreement with HCCSC.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions, comments, or discussion?
There will also be a letter going out to the parents if they're not able to attend that meeting too, correct? That's attached.
I'm sorry, Ryan, could you a little...
Yeah, there'll be a parent meeting. You talked about the parent meeting, but there's also a letter to the parents as well.
Yeah, one
For
letter to
information,
parents
correct?
that went home electronically and otherwise. And Meg is available, as well as Principal Wappus and Principal Yarger at middle schools. Parents have any questions whatsoever, reach out to us. We're glad to help. There will be a parent square that goes out for the middle school parents for 6th and 8th if they'd like to attend an optional meeting as well.
Thank you.
Well, and I'd like to thank administration. We did receive a parent email asking about the informational session and whether one would be held, because initially we weren't going to offer that because the materials that go out to parents are pretty thorough and there's a lot of information online. But I want to thank admin for checking the other box, and now we do have a parent information session on September 12th. So thank you for accommodating that request.
Certainly.
If there's no other questions or comments, we'll vote on the motion to approve this agreement. All right, motion passes 6-0. We'll now move to the consent agenda items E1 through 8.
Yes, I will highlight a couple of these for you this evening. The first one for your consideration is the English Language Learner Program Coordinator. Mrs. Grube happens to be with us this evening. Angie has done a yeoman's job. She's been incredible. She has worn many hats over the past couple of years, and not only has served in this capacity, but it also has taught. Any of you who know Angie knows what a tremendous person she is, a consummate professional. But our English language program is growing, isn't it? And we are in need of, and we're in your personnel reports, you'll see some things being done today where we're adding staff. And so, Angie, thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate your coordination of this program. This is a heavy lift. If you look at her job description, we're asking a lot. and I have no doubt that someone of Mrs. Grube's talent, skills, and disposition will do this extremely well. So Angie, thank you. I am grateful for you, and our students are the benefit of that. With our English language learner population growing like it is, Chuck and Jay and I, along with Angie, will be talking about how do we continue to accommodate the tremendous needs of our community in this area. So Angie, thank you. I sincerely appreciate that. We have for your consideration there too another officer for your consideration, security officer for that. Sometimes I field questions in the community. This is not an SRO. This is just someone who comes in from time to time to help us with supervision issues at ball games, maybe at lunch, maybe at whatever. You'll see that this is a lunch position for that there too. Requesting donations. Lincoln Elementary is requesting permission to accept a donation amount of $474 from Donors Choose for Mrs. Purdy's class for students' vocabulary and background knowledge. And then the HCCSC Food Service is requesting permission to accept a donation in the amount of $100 from Valerie Stout to be used to pay for students' unpaid lunch accounts across the district. So and number 8, you have the accounts payable and all the recent payroll vouchers. So I'm requesting your permission for consent agenda from items E1 through 8.
All right, thank you, Mr. Trout. Would anyone like to make a motion regarding the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Would anyone like to pull out a particular item and vote on it separate from the full consent agenda? All right, then does anyone have any questions, comments, or discussion before we vote? All right, hearing none, we will vote on the motion to approve the consent agenda items E1 through 8. All right, motion passes 6-0, and the Grube family is welcome to stay for the budget workshop if you want to, or not. So now we'll move on to F1 budget workshop.
Okay, this evening we are thrilled to have Mrs. Smith here as our virtual CFO, who not only does a lot of presentations for us, but a lot of training. So Becky, I continue to be grateful for you and your support of us in this school district. I continue to learn a lot from you, and so I am grateful for you and everything that you do for us as a district. This evening, what we're going to do and what she's going to present to you is a 25 budget tip. It's the budget workshop. There's a few slides here we're going to go through this evening. Please make sure that if you have comments or questions on any of these that you do not hesitate to ask Mrs. Smith. But Becky, again, thank you. Welcome. Glad you're here.
Thank you, Superintendent Trout, members of the board. Thank you for this evening to be able to present this budget workshop for you. And we'll move right along. Like Mr. Trout said, we have several slides for you to look at some trend data and the budget information. You'll see the agenda here where we just go over a couple of the objectives, goals, mission, vision, the budget calendar and schedule, the school corporation and major budgeted funds, stakeholder input, data gathering, review the comparisons, and then the next steps. So our objective, of course, for a budget is to maintain the expenses within the revenue streams provided, and our goal is to focus on programs for our students and services for achievement while providing a competitive compensation package to obtain and retain employees. Next, you'll see on the screen the 2024-2025 budget calendar deadlines by the Department of Local Government Finance. This information is dictated straight from that agency that gives us the parameters that we must meet each year. For instance, it tells us what our last adoption date can possibly be, or hearings, or workshop, or permission to advertise, those type of criteria that's required by law. So what we do is we take that information and then we work backwards from those dates. So then we develop this budget preparation calendar just for Huntington County Community Schools, and we work backwards with your board meeting dates and to be able to adhere to all the mandatory requirements for building a budget for each district. And then you'll see here just talking about the school corporation and the public funds. We work on a cash basis. There is a handful of school districts in the state of Indiana that do work on accrual basis. Anyone that has over 15,000 students is required to go by accrual, but here at Huntington, we're able to do the cash basis. We go by a fund accounting where we have different funds. The regular funds that you'll see across Indiana are the education fund, the operations, debt funds, some have referendum funds, art and historical, food services, grants, other ancillary funds throughout the district, donations and such. And then the budgets, of course, the major funds are approved through this process that we're doing these next 3 board meetings. And then other budgets through grant funds are through the federal government or the Department of Ed through state resources. This is just a slide indicating the major budgeted funds. If you recall back in 2019, a lot of people still say general fund. Just want to kind of explain that. In the past, it was a general fund. Then there was also a capital projects, transportation operating, and then bus replacement. Back in 2019, they took the 4 buckets that used to be in the general fund and they split them out. 2 buckets moved into what we call now the new education fund, and the other 2 buckets got moved to operations along with the capital projects fund, transportation operating, and bus replacement. All those moved into the operations. So the state looks at it as our education fund is all the education straight aimed toward students. That's from the building levels and anything that's curriculum related. So that's our principals, all the staff there, our teachers, all that is coming out of our education fund. The operations are departments such as the superintendent's office, the business services department, and such. So those are the overall operations facilities, those type of things. And then our sources between each fund, I'll go through when I review those individual funds themselves. So our revenue, our main revenue for the district comes from 2 different main sources, and one is the state tuition, which is also called basic grant, and that's based on our student enrollment. It's called ADM, average daily membership, and there's 2 counts per year for that. One is in the fall, and one is in the spring. One is October for fall, and then February for spring. And the other funds are our local property taxes and other miscellaneous revenues. What type of expenditures are allowed within each of the funds? It's what I just described between the education and the operations fund. The other ancillary funds is our debt service fund. That is above and beyond what we could afford through our operations fund, and that is to maintain our buildings through different general obligation bonds and lease rentals through different bond sales and such. And then referendums, of course, we do not have referendums here, but some of the other districts do that hold an additional tax for more items throughout their school district. Building a budget takes all different avenues of input, of data gathering, and of course goes all the way from the superintendent, the school board, all the different departments within the school district, along with, it has to do with, of course, negotiations, any kind of bargaining agreements that we've had in the past, technology, special services, all different directors of elementary and secondary education. So it includes a lot of different variables to build the budget for the district. And all this data gathering, wanted to supply some historical data for you and the known variables that helped with the data gathering and the budget projections for 2025. Here you'll see a slide of our history of enrollment. This is our average daily membership for our fall count. That fall count provides our revenue for the first 6 months of the fiscal year, which is July through December each year. And then you'll see the trends with our enrollment. And our enrollment for this year, of course, we do not know until we do the count in October. And then we also show the trends of the spring enrollment, which is in February. And you'll see that history for the district also from 2018 all the way to 2024, and just an estimate for 2025.
So, Board, this is what we talked about at the very end of the last meeting. Kevin asked this question. When we're going through this, you'll notice that our estimates are lower than what I stated at the end of the last meeting. This is done intentionally. This is done, quite frankly, on purpose, is that we're building a budget very conservatively.
Yep.
If something would happen to our student enrollment between now and count day, October, I think it's October the 1st,
Yes.
October the 1st, is that we haven't built a budget on students that we do not have.
Exactly.
And so if you're looking at this and going, why is this number different than what you told us at the end of the last meeting? It's strictly because we're hedging. We want to make sure that we're building a budget on a very conservative number. Now, above and beyond this will be absolutely fantastic.
Right.
And we're anticipating that, but we can't build a budget on that. I hope that that's making sense of what I'm trying to say, and the community understands that, because that is different than what we quoted, but that's what Becky and I are trying to do here.
Absolutely. And to remind you that this budget for these major budgeted funds are January through December of 2025. So just think of that. That is 2 different school years. It's an end, of one school year and a beginning of the next school year. Like Mr. Trout said, it's hard to look into that crystal ball to see what our enrollment may be. So on the revenue side, we're always very conservative. And then on the expenditure side, of course, is the opposite way, where we do worst case scenario. So then we don't get in trouble with our budget. Then you'll see we take that information and we have a tuition support worksheet that we do through the Indiana Department of Ed. So we take those estimates and then we run a formula based on what the legislative session approved for funding for schools. And it lets us put in those estimated enrollments to get an approximate number for our basic grant tuition support for the future. So moving on, you'll see the tax rate history for Huntington here. And wanted to show you that from 2019 to present year. And you'll see the difference column there. And of course, you can tell by the graph. So you'll see in 2020, it went down 12%. We went back up in 2021, and then went back down in 2022, down in 2023, and then down in 2024. So just wanted to the difference, just the change. But you'll see that variation between looking at the graph of not exactly a stable tax rate. So when we look at these type of things, we have to try to project out what our assessed valuation, it's a formula. You'll see that little formula in the green box there, and how you determine what the rate will be. And with those formulas, it's general algebra. If you know at least 2 of those variables, then you can predict the third variable. So that's why you have 3 different formulas there. The next slide, you'll see our assessed valuation. And our assessed valuation is, as your assessed valuation goes up, your tax rate naturally goes down, because it's a formula based on that. So there's different means that you can do through budgeting process to try to stabilize that tax rate. That's what we're trying to do. If you remember, over the last couple of years, that we have communicated to the board and to the public that we're trying to keep that tax rate stable, so then our community can rely on that and be able to budget their own families within that rate for the future. So this is, you'll see here, the trends for Huntington with the assessed valuation. It has gone up ever since 2020. You'll see that it was just 1%, then 4%, then 5%. Then you'll see in 2023 across the state, you'll see that big spike of 15%. Then most of the state in 2024 kind of leveled off. We still had an increase here in Huntington at 3.8%. And then in 2025, before everything came out, the projections were that they projected anywhere from 4 to 6%. Then we got our net assessed valuation for Huntington, and we had a 13% increase. So we're still looking into that to see what variables are known for that spike. This information was just released in August, so we are looking into that with our financial advisors to see if we can narrow down on the spike that we did receive this year. The others, I would say from middle of the state on down south, average between 4 and 6%, 3 and 6%. So that is a significant increase that was not expected for Huntington for 2025.
So Becky, if you could jump back to slide 15 there.
Yep.
This one here is what we're talking about.
Mhm.
So for our community that's watching at home and those in the audience tonight, some of the trainings we have done with all of you, some of the conversations we've been having is to talk about the importance of a flat tax rate. What we're going to try to do here over the next few years is to flatten that out, okay? And so that we're not sending this message to our community that the tax rate is all over the board here, so to speak. So just please know that this is a really important slide in this whole presentation here, and I want to draw your attention back to that. But what we're going to try to do there in the left column is the actual tax rate is quit that variance from happening. There is to have a consistent, steady, flat tax rate. And so that's what we're trying to accomplish here. That's what she's talking about. Within that, that's some of the previous discussions. That's some of the trainings we have done, is the importance of that. And then if you look on 16, the variable that makes this so hard is the assessed valuation piece. And so many times the community does not understand the connection between these two slides here, between AV and tax rate, but how that plays into this bottom line. So I think I said that correctly, didn't I, Becky? So, yeah.
And then we'll expand a little bit on that when we come to our debt service slide and
Right.
some other information that we'll be able to share. So then we're going to go through the review comparisons for each one of the funds and what we came up with for the 2025 budget. So this is looking at our education fund. Remember the main source that we get is from state sources, and that is our tuition support, our basic grant, and it's based on our enrollment. So you'll see there our 2024 budget order. That's our certified budget for this current calendar year, January through December, and then what we're asking later in this board meeting for advertising purposes and the difference between each one. Now, the difference of that is just that the estimate from our enrollment, and you'll see that wasn't a huge increase for that. So we wanted to kind of maintain that information for the future to, like Mr. Trout indicated, to be conservative on our revenue side. Then next you'll see the expenditures. Our expenditures we have divided out by what we call objects. Objects are the types. And I like to put in that percent on the right-hand side and show everyone how over 96% of our education fund is what? Salaries and benefits. These are directly aimed towards students. These are our educators that are educating our students that come out of our education fund. So you'll see the majority of this fund is all salaries and benefits. And then you'll just see the comparison with the budgets and what was certified as the budget order and our previous assessed valuation. It does not have a levy or a rate. The levy is property taxes, and of course, like indicated, that we have our revenue comes from our our basic grant, our tuition support based on our ADM.
Just to go back to, if I can get on the right slide, slide 19, with the expenditures. With the combining of textbook funds going back into educational funds, where would we see that in this expenditures line item?
You'll see that in the supply line item there,
Supply
that
line.
586,000, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and thank you for that reminder. It is changing. Our curricular materials currently is in a separate fund, 0900, and it is moving. The state has moved that where after December, we're moving that into our education fund. They have provided some separate account numbers for us to use, but it will be embedded in our education fund. So you'll see the difference in the revenue that we've projected has to do with that state support also. So that wasn't just a plain line item just for our ADM enrollment, but it also will be for our curriculum materials disbursement. I remind everybody that it's not a reimbursement like it used to be. It is a disbursement based on a statewide formula. And we receive that in December of each year, but now when we go to do the expenditures for calendar year 2025, they will actually come out of the education fund. So that is another reason for the increase in the expenditures in the proposed budget for education fund.
Cool, and that 586,000 is not the entire amount that we currently have in our curricular funds.
Right, that's just what no, it is not.
Yeah.
So our curricular materials fund has over $2 million in it, and that revenue will be moved into education fund for January 1st, and then our expenditures average around this $500 and some thousand per year. So we're able to, if we would have a different adoption year and elementary or secondary has a larger amount, then we would have the cash to be able to come back to the board for an additional appropriation if needed. We went on the trend of what we usually spend per year.
You answered my next question, so thank you.
Awesome, thank you. So here was the comparison that we talked about. Moving on, wanted to talk about our debt service fund. This is another major budgeted fund. And then you'll see here the difference between 2024's official budget order and advertised for 2025. Now for 2025, we are averaging, would like to advertise a little bit higher property levy, but that does not mean that the tax rate will go up. To remind you earlier that we talked about is keeping that tax rate stable. So we advertise high, so when they go to calculate our budgets and based on the actual debt service amortization schedule, it's just like your home mortgage. So your home mortgage, you do a 30-year mortgage and you get that schedule that it shows you how much is going to the principal and how much is going to your interest every year. It's the same exact thing for our debt service fund that it does once we sell general obligation bonds and lease rentals for our debt service. And those type of fundings fund our overall repair and maintenance. It can be roofing, it can be renovations here at the high school, it can be all kinds of different things that we do through our debt service fund. So we advertise those projects, we sell those bonds and leases, and then we go ahead and do all of our construction, and then we pay back those bonds and leases over time. So this debt service fund is where we pay back that money through. Here is what we call long-range debt service plan. So this schedule, it shows all of our current debt by type. You'll see in the yellow or orange color general obligation bonds. You'll see in the blue lease rentals, and then some ancillaries that might have fees or common school fund loans. Those are in the purple. Along the top there, you'll see the years. And every time that we sell or sell bonds and leases, we get those amortization schedules and we put it on this long-range debt service schedule. And then it shows how long and what our payments will be for how many years. Also, what we build in there is any anticipated future debt. So you'll see that on the last line in each category. You'll see that statement in there with some future estimated numbers. And then along the bottom, you'll see those formulas that I talked about where you take the assessed valuation times the tax rate, all that good stuff, to try to estimate what we would like our tax rate to be. So you'll see there highlighted at the bottom, our goal that we've had over the last 2 years is to maintain or stabilize that tax rate and not go over 39.5 cents. So that is by design, and that the board and administration has made that decision that they will not go over that rate. So when we go to publish our budgets, we actually put that rate in, because whatever rate that you advertise for, you cannot go over that rate. So we put that rate as a safety net to make sure, even if it would calculate over, the state will only maintain that rate that we advertise through you, the board, to the community. Next, you'll see this where we talked about the budgets, the assessed valuation, the property tax that it would approximately raise, and that rate that I was just talking about. You'll see here 2024's budget order was approximately $38.98 for the rate, and that was due to some debt falling off. Before that, the rate was much lower, and that's where you saw that roller coaster in the rate in that graph. And then you'll see in 2025, the advertised is that max that we said that we would go as a district. Now, that doesn't mean we have to go up to that. That doesn't mean that we, might or might not sell bonds to keep that tax rate stable. But that is our goal, is to come back as debt falls off, to be able to insert new general obligation bonds, or at least to do major projects that we need throughout our district. You know that what we've done here at the high school, we're doing some things at Salamone, and there's a lot more that is needed throughout the district that we plan to do as debt falls off, that we can do within our limits of our maximum rate for our debt service fund. Our operations fund, you'll see here the difference from this fund. Most of the revenue comes from our property taxes, and this is a maximum levy fund, and I'll explain that on a couple more slides that we get to. So the state does a calculation for us and gives us a maximum amount that we can raise in property tax for this operations fund. That is another reason why we utilize our debt service fund, is because this is it does our different departments, our superintendent's office, our business services office, our technology, all those different departments throughout the district, general repair and maintenance, but not large project items. So as you know here, with the project that we're doing at the high school and some other projects across the district, that costs a lot more than what this $11 million shows here. We in 2022, we did over a $30 million lease to be able to do some projects, and we have a lot more on our building envelopes that we have to do across the district that we haven't been able to do in a lot of years. So we've set ourselves up financially to be able to insert those throughout all of our regular major budgeted funds without having to go to the public for a referendum. So this is the calculation that comes from the state, where they give us that maximum levy calculation for our operations fund, and this is just an estimate at the time. That's why when you see that property tax in the budget, it's higher than this amount, because like I said, this is an estimate. So you have to make sure that you advertise high enough, because if they recalculate this and there was any kind of error, you're stuck to whatever you advertise. So that's why we always advertise that amount a little higher for our operations fund. So when they do the final calculation, they will change it to the maximum calculation that they can do for the operations fund.
Okay, so a couple times I get asked about why the numbers are so different from the previous year, and I just want to re-hit this again.
Exactly.
You keep using the words advertise versus actual, okay?
Yes.
And I don't want people to think that we're not being totally transparent
not at all.
through this process, because even though it's advertised at this level, the state will make the adjustments and it will
Exactly.
come down.
Yes, it's a protection for the district.
Right.
In case the state would calculate higher, then we protect ourselves to be able to
Right.
utilize that revenue that they calculate at.
So I want you to know, you've heard from her a lot this evening about actual versus advertised.
Absolutely.
And for community members who may not deal with this on a
Exactly.
frequent basis, that can be enormously confusing
It is.
through the process. And so when you see the variances of the number, people may come back in a month and say, well, that's not the same number you did at your budget workshop.
Right.
Well, exactly.
Mhm.
Because in the 15 years I've been a superintendent, this is the state always brings it back down.
Yep.
And am I saying that correctly? Yeah.
100%.
Okay.
Yes. And then what we do at the end of the calendar year, you'll see that later in the presentation on the steps, is they certify our budgets and give us those final budgets. We come back to the board and the public to let you know what those were calculated at. And then here, we don't want you to forget about the circuit breaker impact. The circuit breaker is a limit of what taxpayers can pay on their properties. So when this was established years ago, we used to get a certain amount, whatever the formula calculated, and then that's what the district received in their property tax. When the circuit breaker, when legislative session changed and they instituted this circuit breaker and helped the taxpayers, that loss of revenue hit the school districts. So this is a history of this amount that we have lost as a district of what was originally calculated and then what they take off our revenue calculation because they do not charge the taxpayers over their certain amounts. There's 1%, a 2%, and a 3% that we could go into a whole nother work session explaining how that is calculated. But this you just would like to see as anywhere from 1.6 million to the 2.4%, which is high for this district. Another district that I do the budget for, ours used to be $2 million, now it's down to $600,000 and double the size of this district. So you still have that maximum levy that you get in your operations fund. Then they take the circuit breaker and take it off that revenue that you would have received. So this is a direct impact of a loss of dollars for the school district, but it's one of those double-edged swords that then it's there to help the taxpayers not have to pay above and beyond what the state calculates for their taxes. And
So then what we're projecting is that about 2.4 million loss, okay, in this tax cap.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I just want to clarify where that usually is taken out of. That is taken out of the operations fund.
Operations fund
So
that
when
has
you're
that
looking at the
maximum
different
levy.
funds, it's not the education fund, it's not debt service, it's all out the operations. So
Another
we have
reason
even
why we
less
have our
money
debt
in the
service.
operations fund to do the things that we need to do at the corporation because of tax caps.
Absolutely. That's correct. Yep, thank you. Then you'll see this spread out here for our operations fund by the type, by the objects. And you'll see there a little over 42% for salaries and benefits. And then you see all the rest of the stuff. We have anywhere from utilities to general supplies, which that's our repair and maintenance and those type of things that might come through other purchase services, and then capital outlay and technology, you'll see there also listed.
So just to reiterate, we're budgeting 21 million, but we know we're going to be 2.5 million less than that.
Absolutely. That is correct. That's why we budget high in case that calculation for that circuit breaker tax comes in lower than they anticipated at that 2.4 million, and that's why we advertise a little bit higher to be able to give us that leeway. Now, remember, we will not spend over what we get from our property taxes or any other ancillary regular revenue that we receive. So you'll see that here where those comparisons with the budget order versus what's advertised, like we talked about, and same thing with the tax rate. The state will adjust all of the number 20, the information in that column 2025 advertised. They'll adjust that once they finalize that circuit breaker impact and then also the maximum levy. So after that, then that's what they'll certify, and we'll come back to the board later December/January, because sometimes it's right at the end of December. Then we bring it back to you in January to explain the actual certified budget order that we receive. And then also part that we're required to do is a capital projects plan, a 3-year plan. Now, what this plan means, you might look at it and go, wait a minute, we're doing way more than this, Becky. Well, it's because gives you the opportunity to purchase these type of things through the operations fund. So this isn't what you do out of your debt service fund or those bonds or those leases that we talked about. If you want to use your operations fund, you're supposed to come up with a capital plan, and that's what this is. So it's comprised of 2 different sections, and that is capital acquisition, and this is any kind of equipment, those type of things that's over $10,000 that you might want to utilize your operations fund for. So it is a 3-year plan. The only plan that you're held to is the current year that we're doing, which is 2025. So each year you have to do this 3-year plan, but you can change the other 2 years once you come to that year. So next year when we go to do the 2026 budget, if we have different needs and want to change our plan, we can change it at that time when we do 26, 27, and 28, those 3-year plan. But we're held, it's just to give the administrators, the school board, and the public an idea of what might be purchased out of our operations fund. The next thing is projects in nature over $10,000. So this has a large scope. You'll see things like regular landscape maintenance or HVAC repairs or replacements. It could be, these are usually littler projects, so to speak, that you wouldn't warrant a bond or a lease for. So these are usually under $1 million projects. That's what I talked about for needs in your actual operations fund, and then all the higher projects in that are usually $1 million more. So these are things that doesn't mean that we're doing all these. It depends on funds available and timing for these, but this gives us an envelope to be able to use as a guide when we go into 2025. We also are required to do a bus replacement plan, a 5-year bus replacement plan, and this is usually any buses that are over 12 years of age. Now, there are times that you can replace a bus earlier than 12 years, and we keep track of the mileage. We keep track of repair and maintenance. We could have a lemon that comes, that's what I call a lemon, that, one that could be 8 years old, and it's just given us problems. For some reason, it's not a good vehicle. We've all had that personally in our lives, unfortunately, where we buy this vehicle and we think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and then all of a sudden it nickel and dime us. But so every once in a while you'll see one that might be replaced earlier than normal, but our general guide and that we do with this bus replacement plan is our 12-year replacement. So this shows you the next 5 years of what we're looking to do. This screen shows 3 of those 5 years. And then this screen shows you the last 2 years and then the totals that are anticipated. So this is a guide. This doesn't mean that if the money does not come through that we'll still do 9 buses in 2025. That's our goal if we have the funds available. So this is our best case scenario. And then if for some reason all the funding doesn't come through, then we still use this as a priority of the first so many that are listed on the list. So we are, if you've known for the last couple of years, we're back to our regular replacement for our buses. So that is our goal each year, is to do this approximate amount for the next 5 years.
So you answered my first question that we're back on schedule, but it looks like over the next 5 years, we're planning on replacing 44 buses. How many buses total do we have in the district? Do you know?
Oh, gosh. Trying to remember.
More
Val,
than
do you
that.
remember how many we have? 80? Oh,
More
so
than-
yeah, I couldn't remember.
My apologies, more than 60.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Thank
knew
you.
that, but I was like, oh, what's the other years? So, and that's why we,
62,
excuse me?
62, I believe.
62. So that's why we look at each year and we look at the mileage too. So depending on the routes, we could have one bus that, has a lot more miles than another bus that is 12 years old, and that one's acting perfect. So we could flip-flop those two and replace one and wait another year or so for the other one that had lower miles. So that's why we record all that.
You may not know this, but Chuck may. At what year do they require a second inspection for a number of years? Is it 10 or 12? Do you know?
I don't have the year. Vanessa handles that, Ryan, but I do know that our percentage, when Mr. Trout and Becky and all of us arrived, the percentage of buses that were at the 12 years or higher was extremely high in this district. So getting catch-up, as Becky said, has been extremely important. And so our buses
Are
do a
inspected
great job
annually.
and are inspected annually and inspected regularly and do a great job. But just the mere age of them alone, this is an outstanding need for Huntington schools.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to say it has maybe not been prioritized in the past, and it needs to be.
Yes.
Thank you.
And we are required, there's a state requirement that they do come in annually and re-inspect our buses annually.
And I know that there's an age at some point where that annual gets turned into
Oh,
twice
that-
a year.
yeah.
That's the number I was looking for, and I think
Yeah.
it's kind of around that 10 or 12 year mark.
Yeah, whether it's 10 or 12, Ryan, I do know that the bus inspections go well here, but again, the mere age of them is concerning, so this will get us back in the good graces. They're safe, they're excellent, but they are old, and the bus replacement plan will take care of that for us.
You know, we're waiting on 2 orders as we speak.
Yes.
And so this is something that still has not caught up since the pandemic.
Exactly.
So many other things have, but for whatever reason in this industry, it hasn't. So literally, we have placed 2 orders that we're waiting on to still come in to this day. So this fall, once you approve this, we'll be making the 3rd order. And so Chuck, Vanessa, and I have to continue to remind ourselves, now where are we at in this process?
Exactly.
Because if we don't get our names in, the backlog just continues. And so it's just really important that we stay up with this at this point.
And that's what's really helpful with a bus replacement plan, that they can do this since this is started. So what the manufacturers require is what's called a letter of intent. So that's what we've been doing, is signing this letter of intent based on this bus replacement plan. So that guarantees that we're setting aside this money for this bus replacement in that aspect. So hopefully, I've heard this across the whole state of Indiana, that they're at a minimum of 2 years behind. The manufacturer is not Huntington, but the manufacturer.
Thank you.
Okay, next steps. So talking about the steps through the budgeting process. The budgeting process consists of 3 major steps. One is this evening that we're holding this budget workshop, and then later in this board meeting, we'll ask for permission to advertise what we talked about during this budget workshop. And then next is a budget hearing. That's at the next board meeting after we've advertised. And then the last process for the board would be to adopt the budgets, and that's in the October board meeting. After we put all this budget projections together, then, of course, our work doesn't stop. So there's more forms that we have to fill out, and this is a flow chart that shows what we have to do in the Indiana Gateway site. And it has all these different forms that actually create the Form 3, that we are utilizing this evening for and asking the board for permission to advertise, and we'll go over some of those figures that summarizes everything that we're talking about this evening. So this next slide is a portion of the Form 3, which are the budget estimates that you saw from the other summaries. So now on top of this, I want to show you and remind you the transfer that you see up there on the screen where it says Transfer to Operations Fund. Remember when I talked about those 4 buckets, and 2 of them were moved in the new education fund and 2 of them were in the operations fund? Well, when they moved those buckets of expenditures, they didn't move the money that went with those buckets. So the money that comes into education fund is still that master amount that we used to get in our general fund. So the law allows districts to transfer up to 15% of that money to cover those expenses from those other 2 buckets that were moved in the operations fund. Why they didn't separate that, I can't explain. I don't know. I thought after this many years that they would have done that by now and separated out for you, but they still have not. So districts can do up to 15%. Around here, we average anywhere from, I think, 11 to 13%, depending on the year and the needs, from our education fund to our operations fund for those expenses from 2018 of those buckets that were moved into our operations fund. And then you'll see the other ones listed that match our projections that we had on the previous slides per fund. And then the estimated levies, these are your property taxes. These are also the summary from those previous slides for our debt service fund and our operations fund. You'll see here, of course, we don't have anything for our education fund because that's based on basic grant tuition support, so there is no property taxes. And then rainy day, if we were going to advertise in rainy day, that's just from cash balances that from rainy day savings fund that we have, and we do not have any property taxes in that fund either. So then what do we do with this? We need to advertise. After this evening's meeting, we're required to advertise our bus replacement plan and our capital projects plan. So on Gateway, which is our Indiana state website for government units, and on our actual website for our school district. And then also for our Form 3 that we just went over is what's considered our notice to taxpayers, to notify them of what we're advertising for our budgets and letting them know that we will be holding a public hearing at our next board meeting, which is on September 24th. So there are requirements between each of these 3 steps that we talked about. There has to be 10 days in between from advertising and holding the public hearing, and then again from the public hearing to adoption.
So, do we still have to advertise it in the newspaper, or did that get
Nope.
changed in law?
The Indiana Gateway superseded that.
Cool, thank you.
So that is the public means to be able to see the budgets for all entities in Indiana. That goes for schools, libraries, all that. So this talks about next board meeting. What we'll have is we'll conduct 3 budget hearings, and one is for the major funds that we just talked about, and the other is the capital projects plan, and then the bus replacement plan. And then at our October 14th board meeting, that's when we'll ask for the board to adopt the budgets. And if you recall, that one has different forms that you look at, that has different resolutions that we are required to adopt along with the budget, along with the capital projects plan and the bus replacement plan. So other different requirements, we have things that we get from the county after we've held our public hearing and adoption, that we have no remonstrance against our budgets, and we get that certification from the county. And then also we have to upload all the signed forms that goes through the board, those resolutions that I talked about that the board has to sign off on, and we upload all that. That's when they take that information over the next 3 months, and they do all our calculations. They do that across the whole state of Indiana. And then they issue what's called a 1782 notice, and that, what I call that, is a draft budget order. So they give us that draft budget order. We have 10 days to respond. We go through that like a fine-tooth comb. I would say at least 30% of the time there's an error. I would say that in my 20-year career doing this, that we might notice that they left one of our debts off. So if they forget something in your budget, of course, that does the calculation completely different, which we wouldn't receive as many dollars with that calculation. So we check everything with that 1782 notice, and then we either respond with, yep, everything's correct, hunky-dory, go ahead and certify, or no, wait, we find this error, or we need you to look into X, Y, or Z. So after all that goes back to the Department of Local Government Finance, then there is a legislative Indiana code that says they're supposed to certify by December 31st. Now that doesn't always happen. Sometimes it goes into January, but then, like I indicated earlier, after we do receive that certified budget order, then we'll come back to the board and present those to you and go through those numbers with you at that time. Now, I know that's a lot of information, and it's everybody's favorite topic, talking about finance and budgets, but I would be happy to answer any more questions the board may have at this time. It's my favorite topic, as you can tell, so that's why I'm a CFO, but I love budgets. It's my favorite.
Becky, I'll say again, thank you. I appreciate the detail, appreciate working with you this closely. The training you provide for us, the education you provide for us as a board is also enormously helpful in a lot of settings, so thank you. Board, you've had this in your board packet, you've had time to chew it over. I've talked to a couple of you about specific details within that. If you do have any questions between now and the next board meeting, she's laid out very well what we're going to be doing next. Please don't hesitate to reach out to her, okay?
All right, we'll now move on then to item F2, permission to advertise.
So, Becky, you want to talk a little bit about this? I know you're going to feel like you're going to repeat yourself here, but
Okay.
I think it's important that we go through this one more time.
Absolutely. So this is the part of the first step that we talked about that's required. So we just held the budget workshop for you and the community, and next we're asking for permission to advertise that Form 4 that we had, those numbers up there that give the budget estimate, projected estimate, and the estimated levies to be raised. That notice to taxpayers also shows the public hearing dates for the public and also the adoption dates. So that is an official notice to the taxpayers that will be posted on our website tomorrow, and then also on the Indiana Gateway website. So we have the Form 3 of those numbers, and then we also have our capital projects plan and also our bus replacement plan that will advertise the same exact way on our website and the Gateway website. And we're asking for permission to advertise those as presented this evening.
All right, thank you. Would anyone like to make a motion regarding the proposed budget advertisements for the 2025 budget?
Say capital projects, right?
Yeah, I covered all three.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, hearing nothing. Motion passes 6-0, and thank you very much, Mrs. Smith.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate your help. We'll now move to item G1, items of discussion by board members.
Just so everybody knows what's coming up here in the near future, I mentioned this to a few of you before, is that we will be holding board informational evening. I hope to get letters sent out to current board and board members running for this evening. This will be broadcast to the community. Topics to be covered that night will be the roles of the superintendent and the roles of the school board, district finances, academics. We'll cover quite a few topics that evening. There'll be a free flow of questions and answers throughout the evening, but you as board and people running for board seats coming up will get a letter from me, hopefully, by the first part of next week. You will get a letter from me inviting you to come to that evening so you can learn. I know we give this current board even an opportunity to ask questions too, but we'll be covering a variety of topics that night and giving everybody a chance to do Q&A, and that will be broadcast to the community just like we do the board meetings. The second piece on here too is that I've been in contact with our Teachers Association. I think they're going to set up a question and answer session for board members running for the open board seats, and that'll be coming up at some point in time. I don't know if they've set the evening yet or not, but just so the community knows that that will also be broadcast when they determine when they'd like to do that. But they've been in contact with me about having a Q&A session with all board members running for the open board seats. So between now and election, those two evenings we'll get that broadcast out to the community so they can see that, and to the participants also. So I just wanted the board and the community to understand that those will be upcoming here over the next few weeks, okay?
I just had two things. we've talked about it in the past, but the ISBA's fall conference is September 23rd and 24th down in Indianapolis. I know I'm going. I didn't know if anyone else was going to attend. But the other more important one, I think, to have on your calendar would be November 4th is the fall conference, or the fall information session. That is going to be November 4th up at Cerruti's. I think that's the place. That's where we'll be covering the legislative priorities that we're going to go into the fall budget session for, and just cover other topics that coming up as we prepare for the budget year or the next budget cycle coming up. So always a good night. It's a short meeting, it's a short program, but it's good educational experience and a great opportunity to network with other school board members from around Northeast Indiana.
I'd like to also thank Mrs. Lockmeyer for pinch hitting tonight. Job well done over there, Tanya.
All right, anything else? All right, we'll go ahead and move to H1, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, the ayes have it.